Hello, I am Mac, at least for a day, and everything's going to be okay. Today I'll be doing a Masterclass tutorial. I did the first two Masterclass tutorials back in early access when we just had those two, but they added two more since then, so we're going to do one of them. I missed it already. Where's the master classes? There we go, master classes. Okay, so we're going to do. I already did the remixing Dreamiverse Dash, which is basically a gameplay design tutorial, and I did the sculpting masterclass, which I didn't do too great at. But today we're going to do the sculpting and level assembly masterclass. It says media molecule artist Richard Frank shows you his techniques for creating an organic landscape while considering layout along with technique.
Hi there, I'm Richard Frank. I'm an artist and designer here at Media Molecule. In this Dreams Masterclass, I'm going to be showing you how I like to build environments using the wireless controller. I'll be sculpting, painting and assembling a game level, then finishing off with lighting and effects. I assume you know the tools pretty well, so there won't be too many detailed instructions. It's more about thought processes and techniques. I won't make anything too complex or stylized, so if you're making your own level, you can add your own style and detail. I'll also work as efficiently as possible, so I can build a nice large scene, and leave room in my thermometer for characters, contraptions, logic, etc. And on top of all that, I'll be designing the level so it plays well and feels fun, as well as looking good. There's a big difference between a cool looking environment and one that's fun to play. The way I work allows me to refine the playability and the look of the level as I build and playtest it. This means I only need a rough idea of what I want before I start. I've created a collection of all the parts used in this scene, in case you'd rather just customize and assemble those. Feel free to just watch or follow along as you create your own level. Before you do anything else, play the level to see my finished product. When you finish playing, click the arrow on the video to go to the next step.
Okay, so I'll do like he said and go ahead and play. I don't know how I could click the video though, because this is a playable dream and there doesn't seem to be an edit mode. So there's no way for me to click his video. Maybe after I finish the level, it'll let me click it. But I wanted to minimize it so the video wasn't on there the whole time I play, but whatever. Oh, I guess it's a race, or it times you how long it takes to get through. Man, two different ways to go. I don't know which way to go. I'm just gonna pick one. Looks like there's gems to collect. Oh, that lowers your time when you collect a gem. So I guess you don't want to reach a certain amount of time or something bad happens? I don't know. Or you're just trying to get the best score to get the lowest time in which you complete it. Full disclosure, I don't typically build my own levels. Occasionally I do if I have to, like if there's a very specific type of area I want for a game, I might build the area myself, but usually I remix other people's levels that they've made and make them fit in with the games that I make. It's just a lot easier that way, because it's a lot of work assembling a big level like this. Obviously, there are a lot of shortcuts and stuff that he's probably going to show us, but it still takes quite a while to, especially if you were to sculpt every single thing. Like if he sculpted all these rocks from scratch and everything else, it would take way too much time. You definitely would have to at least use elements that other people made. Otherwise, it's just going to take hours and hours to make a single level if you sculpt everything from scratch. In fact, the first few games that I made in Dreams, I did make from scratch. Hello Mailman, I made all the assets in that game, and with very few exceptions, I made all the assets in Definitely Accurate Bunny Simulator. In fact, I think I did. Yeah, I made everything in that in Definitely Accurate Bunny Simulator. After those two games, though, I realized that it just takes way too much time if you make all the assets yourself. So, in order to make my much bigger games, I had to save time by using other people's assets and also some of their pre-made levels. So, like Quest of Kadath was the first game I made that, in fact, I pretty much didn't make any of the assets in that game with just a few exceptions. All the levels I remixed from other people's levels, and the characters and everything else were all made by other people. I just changed them to fit how I wanted them to look and all that. Obviously, I've never like just straight up used someone's level exactly the way it is. I always have to change the level, delete stuff, add stuff, change the logic and all that so that it works the way I want for a game. But like the basic structure, I use the basic structure of their level if it fits into what I'm trying to make. So that saves a lot of time using a lot of other people's creations and stuff, which isn't a bad thing in Dreams. Dreams is designed to let you remix things and use other people's stuff rather than... Oh, okay. Oh, that is the end. Rather than making everything yourself. So if people release something as public, then yay, continue Masterclass. If people release something as public, they're allowing you to reuse it. So it's not like there's something wrong with using other people's creations. Alright, now, good. Now we're in edit mode, and we can play through.
Before I start sketching out the white box level, there are a couple of things I like to do. First, I usually switch on the floor guide in the guides menu. This helps me orient myself while I work. I then place a puppet in the scene, or whichever character the player will use, to give myself a scale reference. Now, I'll start sketching out a 3D map of the level in Sculpt Mode. For this, I'm mostly focusing on the layout and usability, not so much on the look. They do have a relationship, of course, but to start with, I like to deal with them separately. If they're both great in their own right, then when you bring them together, they'll be awesome. At this stage, it's usually a good idea to have a plan of what you want to make. Maybe sketch out a map on paper, or have an idea of the gameplay. I'm going to make a treasure hunt against the clock, set on a tropical island with a main path and lots of side paths to explore. It will have a start and end, and pass through 3 themed areas. I use the stamp or smear shape tool for sketching, with a shape which is about as wide as 5 times the height of the puppet. You can resize it a bit as you need to, but it's good to stay aware of the scale. Using the wireless controller, it's best to make your big movements viewed from the side. So I always position the camera side on to whatever I'm doing, to minimize having to move in and out of the screen. Also, I don't make my sculpt edits too large. Having them in manageable chunks will make them easier to remove piece by piece later. As I'm sketching, I imagine running through the environment as a player. How far off the main path can they go, and where is off limits? Every time I make a significant change, I go into play mode and playtest the scene. I put myself in the player's shoes as if I've never seen the game before. Can I see where I'm supposed to go next? Are there vantage points where I can get a good view of what's ahead? Is it too easy and boring, or too difficult and annoying to get from A to B. I don't want the player to backtrack, so I'll add some drop-downs where they can't go back. There are many other ways to do this, like gates that close or collapsing bridges if you want to get really fancy. Don't forget to add checkpoint gadgets to your finished level if you do use this technique. It's important to leave plenty of space for the props that I'll be adding later. I also like to add side paths that are more difficult to find, so that I can hide pickups in them. I'm not worried about making it super detailed or polished at this stage. The beauty of this approach is that I can edit it as I go. I'm pretty happy with this white box level now, so when you're ready, let's move on to the next step.
Okay, so yeah, this tutorial is pretty good. I like a lot of what he said about testing it to see if the area is traversable with the character and all that. Let's see, I'm gonna hide video for now, and I'm going to make my own level the way I want to, using some of what he said. Oh no. Please don't tell me, oh, don't tell me I'm only allowed to use this stuff. No. It's only letting me use stuff from this in this tutorial. That's annoying. Oh well. I guess I won't do what I was thinking of doing, but whatever. Okay, well, we'll use this rock ground instead, since I'm not... Actually, I will make it... Oops, shouldn't have deleted it. I'll make it a lot bigger than that. So I'm going to basically make this a tutorial for making an open world. And yes, you can make a really big open world in Dreams. With some exceptions, you wouldn't be able to make as big or complex of an open world as some open world games, because there are limits. But you can make a really large area as long as you don't use too many different assets. The more different assets you use, the more your thermometer goes up. Good thing to do when you're making a level is to turn on the thermometer. This is kind of my own masterclass in addition to the masterclass that he's giving. But I like to turn on the thermometer anytime I'm making my level, because when you reach the max on any of the thermometer things, you can't build anymore. But it usually takes a while to reach the max, but you'll be surprised sometimes. One thing that can really max you out fast is trying to place too many characters. Characters have a lot of different sculptures in them and a lot of different connectors and physics relating to them, so they take up a lot of your gameplay very quickly. Most characters, when you place them, will use up 2% of your gameplay at the least, and also, well, sorry, let me collect my thoughts for a little bit so I don't lose my train of thought here. But oh yeah, and that's for every single character you place, because unlike graphics memory depends on how many different items you have. Like, every time I place one of these things, it almost never adds to graphics because they're all just clones. They're all exactly the same. So graphics memory only goes up if you add different things in. But gameplay memory continues to go up when you add just about anything, because they affect the physics and everything. And so, like I said, characters take up about 2%, unless it's a really complicated character, then it will take up more. And also, there are limits to how many characters you can have active at once, because if you have too many characters active at once, you'll start to get lag and the game will mess up. So, like in my game, Definitely Accurate Bunny Simulator, when I was making that, I ran into walls where the game was lagging really slow because I had a whole bunch of different bunnies fighting each other at the same time. But as you can see, very quickly I've made a very large area, although this isn't that big. But I'm going to continue to make this large area. Actually, okay, this will be one region. So I'll have this rocky area, and then we'll make a grassy area as well. Though I'm probably going to be limited to, man, it doesn't even look like you're allowed to place any other characters in this tutorial, because there's no characters in here. So the only character I have to work with is the one that they gave me. Whoa, I better make sure I don't lose him. If I delete him, I can't place him in again. That's annoying. So I'm not allowed to put multiple characters in this area that I'm making in this tutorial. But anyway, I wonder if there's trees. I'd kind of like to make a forest. I'd like to have several regions, including, let's see, is there trees in here? Yeah, good. Basic tree. Okay, I'm going to make a forest. Stamp in a bunch of trees. As you can see in Dreams, it's really easy to create a game world very quickly. Programming logic is a bit more difficult. But even so, I'm pretty lazy and I don't usually make my own levels from scratch. I usually let other people do that. I reuse them and remake them the way I want them for my games. Because if you're going to make a really big game, you really do have to do that. Making everything from scratch just takes way too long. Now what I think I'll do, I'm going to make this a really giant forest. I'm going to make as big of an open world as I possibly can in this tutorial. Hopefully it won't take up too much time. But I probably should go ahead and continue his video soon before I get too carried away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this little mini forest I made, select all the trees, and all of the ground. And go ahead and group them all together. I'm just going to start making forest all around this area. So basically you're going to start out in this little bare patch, and then it'll be completely surrounded by forest on all sides for you to explore. And it'll look like a big open world. Okay, if I want to change some of these, I have to scope in and move them. As you can see, I've placed all this stuff and it still hasn't used up hardly any graphics because like I said, graphics depend on how many different types of items you put in, how many different assets you put in. The gameplay, though, has gone up quite a bit. graphics start was like at 6% earlier. It's only about 7% now, but gameplay's gone all the way up to 11%. So gameplay continues to go up as you add stuff, but graphics only goes up if you add a new sculpture. So it's all kind of a weird balancing act. I've never maxed out audio. I don't even know how it would be possible to max out audio, but I guess there's some way to do that. But yeah, I'm going to just make a giant forest real quick. Why don't we go ahead and clone all these. I really should get back to the video. I will in just a minute. Just gonna put down giant forest here. Oop, don't want them all selected. Right, some of this is going to look kind of weird because I put it together so quickly, but so yeah, gameplay's gone all the way up to 23%. Graphics is still 7. It's kind of how it works. So it doesn't look too bad. You can kind of tell this is made up of these round things though. But looks kind of like a forest. Not perfectly realistic, but kind of looks like a big forested area. Alright, so I'll get back to watching the video now.
This landscape I've sketched out could be dressed up as any type of environment. Desert and rocks, snowy mountain, grassy hills, or even a surreal alien landscape. With the power of dreams, we can easily make any of these options a reality. When I'm making levels, I always do some visual research to use as reference and inspiration. A simple internet image search should be enough in most cases. In this case, I'm going to do a lush and rugged environment with rocks and foliage. I could add all that styling and dressing to our huge sketch sculpture, but that would take ages. Since I love being able to change things up as I work, I prefer to build a set of pieces to assemble the level from. That way I can easily edit the layout of the scene as I go along in a non-destructive way, and get to a larger and more presentable scene more quickly than if I handcraft this one massive piece. The Dreams engine makes it very easy to do this without any issues technically or visually. Once I've assembled the scene, I'll handcraft unique features to make it feel bespoke. I'll start by building large chunks to block out the space, then I'll assemble them, then I'll work on the smaller details. First, I'll make a basic lump of earth, which can be used as ground, wall, or platform. When you're ready to get started, go to the next step.
So his way of mapping it out with basic shapes and then adding stuff, that's kind of a cool idea. I don't think that's the way I would ever do it. I usually start with a preconceived idea of what I want the level to be like in my head. So I go ahead and make it with assets rather than with basic shapes. I'm not saying his way is bad, it's just not the way I go about it. So I had in my head that I wanted to make a big open world with a forest in it, and I just went ahead and made that instead of mapping it out. Of course, he's making a level, a linear level that you go through each area and collect stuff. I'm just wanting to make a big open world, and if I could, which I can't do in this video because they don't allow me to search for any different assets, I could add in enemies to this level that would spawn when you get to where those enemies are. They would spawn and attack you. I'm even thinking of making a game like this, a game that's a large open world. It would have an overworld like this, so you'd have like this big forested area, and you could travel around and fight enemies in it, and then there would be like entrances to dungeons. So it would basically be an open world but with dungeon crawling, kind of like a Skyrim game. It's something I want to do. It's a more ambitious idea that I have in dreams, making a game almost like Skyrim, in which you explore a big open world, and you also come to dungeons as you go along, and you can do each dungeon and collect things and stuff like that. But that's an idea for the future. But unfortunately, like I said, I can't add in enemies or anything like that right now.
So, first I'll build my basic earthy building block. Later, I'll create variations of it, adding grass, rocks and things like that. I'll begin by creating a new sculpture. I want to use a shape about the size of the one we were sketching with before. Remember, that's about 5 times wider than the puppet is tall. I'll use a large hexagonal cylinder for an angular rocky look. I usually use the stamp tool as it's more efficient and I can soft blend it for organic forms. I'm also going to use a standard brown tumbler from the colour palette. Using standard colours helps with consistency, and the tumblers give a more natural look. It's a good idea to set the finish and fleck now too, although I can always change those later. In the shape editor, I'll flatten the shape so I can create a layered look. Also, while I'm in there, I set the looseness and make it variable. This will make the surface less uniform and more organic. Now, I sculpt the lump of earth to look as if it's been ripped out of the ground. When I'm sculpting, I usually use the touchpad with my thumb to rotate the shape as I move it around. If I don't need precision, it's much quicker than grabbing with L2. The sides will need to work as cliffs and walls, so I make them rugged but vertical enough that they can't be climbed. I want to create a rounded hexagonal shape when viewed from above, so the blocks will slot together nicely. It should have a more or less flat top for walking on. If it's not flat enough, just slice the top off with a large soft blended subtract edit. I use the same shape with soft blend to reduce any bits that need smoothing off. It's a great way to make organic shapes look eroded by time. Like everything I make, I want it to look different from all angles, so that I can reuse it just by rotating and scaling it. For now, I'm happy with its silhouette from every side, so when you're ready, move on to the next step.
Okay, I'm just going to keep going, otherwise this video is going to get too long. I just want to get through all of his tutorial.
Now it's time to add some finishing touches to this earthy building block. There's no point in adding too much detail to these chunks at this stage. We can always add more later. It's better to wait till the level is assembled, so I know which bits the player will see. At this stage, I also like to touch up the colours of the sculpture using the spray paint tool. When using spray paint, I like to turn up the soft blend and turn down the opacity so it's nice and subtle. I also find it useful to switch on surface snap for spray painting with the wireless controller too. This keeps the imp on the surface of the sculpture. The final touch is to tweak the audio surface type so that the puppet's footsteps sound correct. Now that piece is done, I save the sculpture as an element to my creations. Now that I've made the basic sculpture, I can clone it and customize it to create variants, and then save those as nested elements. This means that if I update the basic one, I can update the customized one to pick up the changes I make. In the next step, we'll create some variants.
Okay.
First, I'll clone the earthy block I just made and create a grassy version. When I'm adding new sculptures or paintings to an existing creation, I always change visual feedback to minimal in my preferences. This means I can see more clearly how the creations are working together visually. It does make it less obvious when you're scoped into groups and elements though, so I'll need to be mindful of that. I'll use a similar sculpting technique as before, but in green with a streaky fleck to create the grassy topping. I simply sculpt a layer of grass on the flat top of the earth block, like I'm icing a cake. I want it a bit lumpy, but not too lumpy, as the puppet needs to walk on it. The edges of the walkable area should be nice and clear, so the player knows where they can safely walk. When I'm done sculpting, I go to Style Mode and turn up the impasto, ruffle and looseness to get the grass effect. A tiny hint of the wave effect simulates a breeze and makes the scene feel more alive. Next, I scope into the earthy block again and spray paint around the edges of the grass with the green tumbler colour. This blends in the hard edge of the grass to make it less artificial. I also like to add some paint strokes with surface snap to the grass. I give them the same fleck, impasto and ruffle as the grass sculpture, but make them a little bit longer. This will break up the grass and make it seem more natural and less like a golf course. I'm also making another variant with just the paint strokes straight onto the earth and blended using spray paint like before. This will make a good blend between the full grass and no grass blocks. You can also use a green shape set to subtract to carve a path into the grass. I like to make a few variants so I know I can reuse in many different places and that will blend together well. Remember to try and get away with making as few variants as possible. You can always add more later. I also set the surface types too, like I did for the basic block. When I've made my variants, I group each one's constituent parts. This makes them easier to move and clone around when assembling them. Before I start cloning them, I save them all out as sculpture elements. Now I'm done making terrain, so let's go to the next step and make some rocks when you're ready. Next, I'm going to make some small, medium and large rocks. For these, I use a grey colour and a plastic finish. I choose a fleck that I like and set the looseness to variable again. The smallest rock is the simplest to do. I simply create a cube and chip away at it with any flat-sided shape. I do this with stamp shape so I can use a little bit of soft blend. I try to make it look like a different rock from different angles with flat facets of various sizes and shapes. It doesn't need to be complicated. It shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes. Once I'm happy with the shape, I use the spray paint tool to touch up the colour. Like before, I use the looseness, fleck and finish tools in coat and style mode to finesse the look I want. The medium and large rocks are made in a similar way to the earth terrain chunk I made before. Use a flat hexagonal cylinder, stretched a bit, and construct it in striations. The medium rock should be about the size of the character. The larger one should be considerably bigger, the size of the earth block. Remember, it should be as varied as possible from different angles. To finish off, you can go in and subtly spray paint the rocks a bit with the brown tumbler colour. This will make them sit a bit better with the earthy pieces you've made. When I'm making pieces to construct an environment from, I always try to keep the colour palette cohesive. Once I've made my rocks, I use the small rock to create a rocky variant of my basic earth terrain chunk. Now I've got enough bits, I can start assembling the scene. Once that's done, I'll create some more detailed dressing. When you're ready, move on to the next step. At this stage, I would normally start to put together the scene using the parts I've made. I do this using the sketch as a template. As I lay the blocks down, I hide or delete the sections of the sketch that I'm replacing. I also like to add a C at this stage for when we're playtesting, as the floor guide won't be visible. It's just a giant shiny blue cylinder with a bit of wavy effect on it. Assembling the level before I do any detailed dressing means that I can get a better idea of any blocks which might be missing. It also helps me figure out what I'm going to need to create to dress it nicely. As I assemble the scene using the parts that I've made, I can iterate on the layout. Don't forget to flip and rotate the pieces as you clone and place them to avoid any visual repetition. When I'm placing the pieces, I'm not afraid to change the layout a bit. It's a chance to iterate my ideas as I go along. I also start to think about where needs lighting and where I can add contrasting themes to the different areas. One area might have lots of pebbles, another might be muddier, another might have long grass, another might be totally dominated by big rocks. I tried to make the scene fun and varied to walk through. Like before, I playtest it every time I make significant changes. At this stage, I sometimes build new terrain variants like this stone one. I also customize the variants I've already built for specific purposes. When I'm assembling and playtesting, I always make sure to fill any holes the player might fall or squeeze through. I'm also very careful to make sure that the player can't get to anywhere that's off limits. In either case, I usually just grab an earth block, some grass or a medium rock and shove it in the hole. Assembling the scene can take a while, but will pay off and is very satisfying. In the next step, we'll dress the scene with more detail.
Good idea he gave me there was using a giant shape to just make an ocean, just put it underneath the whole level. I've kind of struggled with how to make it look like you actually have an open world, because usually you end up with just falling off the edge and everything. People don't like that because it doesn't look realistic. It's a good idea to make a gigantic shape underneath that's an ocean, and in order to make it like water, you can turn off its, let me show you, you can turn off an object's, well, I'd have to scope in more, it seems. You can turn off an object's collision. So if you go to physical properties, you can turn off collision. So if you make this giant water shape and turn off the collision, players will fall through it like they're drowning in water rather than falling off into empty space. So I could do that with my level. In fact, why don't we go ahead and do that? I might as well show it instead of trying to describe it. Oh, where's my other motion controller? It's not showing up. Darn it. I'm holding my motion controller, but it's not making the imp appear. I guess I'll have to use... Oh, there it is. I guess my camera isn't in a good place. Okay. So, I'm going to go out and we're going to do this. We're going to make an ocean for my level. It should be really quick. Okay, we'll just go to Sculpt Mode. And we'll make a big blue shape. Let's see, what's a nice ocean blue? I'll go with that. Nah. Yeah. Okay. And we'll make the shape. Whoops. We'll just use a cylinder. This is not the shape one. Here we go. Cylinder. Okay. So we'll just go ahead and make cylinder. Actually, I don't need it to be that deep. Although, whatever. Yeah, we will make this giant ocean. We should make it big enough so that players won't be able to tell that it has an end. It'll look endless from where they are, because things do fade as you get far away. Yeah, I should probably change the flex type so it actually looks like waves. instead of squares. I can change the flex in style mode. Which one would be a good wave shape? I'm not sure. Maybe we should use dots. There, it should be made of dots now. Exit style mode and we'll animate them to make it look like ocean waves. He said, yeah, waves. They actually have a wave animation. We turn on time, we'll see how it looks, how it's going to look. It's a little too much. There we go. Nice. So we just made an ocean. That was easy. We could probably make it look a little better, but... Okay, and then like I said, I'm going to turn off the collision for it so that the player will fall through it as if they're really falling into the water. Okay, let's try it out. See if it looks like you're... Uh-oh. We've got part of the ocean sticking up over here. It's too high. There we go. Let's see if we can get our character to fall into the ocean. Yeah, this is pretty good. Looks like a big open area, forest. And then we eventually come to the ocean. And you can't see the edge of the ocean, it just goes off into the distance. You can fall into the ocean and then you die. So there we are then. Alright, I'm going to try to do a little bit more of the video.
In this kind of environment, the most common kinds of dressing are the small and medium rocks, which we already built, and foliage. Foliage can and should be created in multiple ways for variety. I always start with something very simple. I simply stamp a few streaky flecks in paint mode to create a clump of grass. I use a wax material for foliage to soften the lighting so the flecks blend nicely. The duplicates feature in the tweak menu is useful to make it bigger. These clumps of grass are really useful to cover up joins in the terrain, and even used for gameplay by obscuring the player's view. Again, use the wave effect to make it subtly rustle in the breeze. You can also create a small and simple flower, like the ones in the painting tutorial, and duplicate it the same way. I make the flower white so that I can tint it if I want to. More variety for less memory. I use the draw or brush fleck tools in paint mode to create plants with longer leaves. I use the duplicates option in the tweak menu, but rotate it around a single point to make a fern or similar plant. Remember that paint strokes don't cast shadows, so don't make painted foliage too dense or it will seem weird. I sometimes make the painting physical so it waves in the breeze. Just be sparing with physical strokes as they can get expensive. I turn off the physical tweak for ones that the player will never get close to, as the effect will be too subtle to be worth the expense. For denser foliage, I create a very loose sculpture using a soft blended stamped shape. I usually turn off collidable in the tweak menu, so the player can run through it like real foliage. I use the wave effect here like the grass to give it a bit of movement. The main benefit of sculpted foliage is that it casts shadows, so it's better for the thicker foliage and trees. Speaking of trees, I'll make some in the next step.
Alright, I'm going to run out of time for this video because I can't record more than an hour, so I think I'm going to make this a two-part video. So we'll continue his masterclass in the next part. But I have been Mac, thank you for joining me for a day, and remember, everything's going to be okay.